If your doctor tells you your blood pressure is fine, but only glances at one of the two numbers on the screen, you may be missing the single strongest warning sign of stroke after age 60. The nurse wraps the cuff around your arm. You sit still. You wait. The machine squeezes, holds, releases. Two numbers appear. She reads them out loud. 138/82. You nod. She writes them down. And that is the entire conversation. You have heard those two numbers 100 times. At the annual physical, at the urgent care when you went in for a sore shoulder, at the pharmacy kiosk where you sat down out of curiosity. Two numbers every time, top and bottom, always spoken together, always treated as a pair. 138/82. The doctor glances, says, "Looking okay," and moves on. But those are not one measurement. They are two completely different measurements of two completely different things happening inside your body. And after age 60, one of those numbers becomes the single strongest predictor of whether you will have a stroke in the next 10 years, and the other one slowly stops meaning much at all. When scientists tracked nearly 20,000 adults and entered both blood pressure numbers into the same prediction model, something unexpected happened. The bottom number disappeared. It had zero independent effect on stroke. The top number was doing all the work. That is the largest modifiable risk factor for stroke on the planet, and most people over 60 have never been told which of their two numbers carries the weight. Every week, Inside Aging breaks down the research behind the numbers your doctor reads out loud but rarely explains, so you know exactly what your body is telling you after 60. Here is the part that changes everything. Your blood pressure reading gives you two numbers. The top number, systolic, measures the force of your blood pushing against artery walls every time your heart beats. The bottom number, diastolic, measures the pressure between beats when your heart is resting. When you are younger, both numbers matter roughly equally. Your arteries are flexible. They stretch when the heart pumps and spring back when it rests. Both numbers rise and fall together, and both contribute to your risk. But after about age 50, something shifts. Your arteries begin to stiffen. They lose their elasticity, not suddenly, not all at once, but gradually, year after year. And when that happens, the top number starts climbing on its own, while the bottom number may actually start dropping. The gap between the two widens. And that widening gap is where the real danger lives. A massive European project, tracking 34 population cohorts over 13 years, confirmed it. From roughly age 47 onward, the top number clearly dominated stroke prediction. The bottom number's contribution faded with every passing decade. And here is the part that surprises almost everyone. By the time adults reached their 60s and 70s, very low diastolic pressure, below about 71, was actually associated with higher stroke risk. Not lower, higher. A low bottom number in an older adult is not necessarily good news. It may mean the arteries have stiffened so severely that the heart is slamming against rigid walls on every beat, and the pressure drops sharply between beats because there is nowhere for the energy to go. Your doctor reads both numbers out loud, but after 60, one of them is telling a story that has already changed, and most 12-minute appointments never catch up to that shift. If this is starting to make sense, if you are hearing something about your own blood pressure readings that nobody has explained to you before, take 1 second and hit that like button. When you do, YouTube shows this to other people over 60 who are sitting in that same exam room, hearing two numbers and never being told which one to watch. You could be the reason someone's husband finally asks the right question at his next appointment. You could be the reason someone's mother starts tracking the number that actually matters. Now I want you to do something. If you have a blood pressure cuff at home, and most people watching this do, take your blood pressure right now, or use the last reading you remember. Write down the top number, write down the bottom number. Now subtract. That gap, top number minus bottom number, is called your pulse pressure, and it is the number almost nobody talks about. If your gap is under 40, that is considered a healthy range for most adults. If it is between 40 and 60, you are in the zone where the majority of adults over 60 land, and it deserves consistent monitoring. If your gap is over 60, that is the range researchers associate with significantly elevated stroke and cardiovascular risk, the range where arterial stiffness is actively reshaping how your heart and brain interact with every beat. Post your number in the comments right now, just like this. Mine is 54, or mine is 67, asking my doctor about this. That is all you need to write. We are going to come back to this number at the end of the video, and I am going to show you exactly what to do with it over the next 14 days. So what is actually happening inside your arteries after 60 that makes the top number so dangerous? Think of your arteries like a garden hose. When the hose is new, it is flexible. The walls stretch to absorb the water pressure. That is what young arteries do. They absorb the force of each heartbeat and push blood forward smoothly. Both numbers stay close together. Now imagine that hose has been sitting in the sun for 30 years. The rubber has dried out. It has hardened. You turn on the water with the same force, but the walls do not give. The pressure spikes with every pulse, and instead of absorbing the shock, the stiff walls transmit it directly downstream into the smallest, most delicate blood vessels in your body, your brain, your kidneys, your eyes. That is what is happening inside your arteries after 60. The elastic fibers in the wall are fragmenting. Collagen and calcium are taking their place. The inner lining stops producing enough nitric oxide, the chemical that tells the artery to relax. The vessel gets stiffer, less responsive, and every heartbeat hits it harder. Researchers in the Rotterdam study measured arterial stiffness directly and found that adults in the stiffest third had 2.28 times the stroke risk compared with the most flexible third, even after accounting for cholesterol, atherosclerosis, and average blood pressure. The stiffness itself was the independent driver. And here is where it becomes personal. That pulsatile force, beat after beat, year after year, follows a chain inside your brain. High systolic pressure hammers the tiny vessels. The tiny vessels get damaged. Damaged vessels slow the signals between brain cells. Slower signals show up as memory slips, balance problems, trouble finding words, and eventually, a vessel that has been weakened for years gives way entirely. That is a stroke. The damage is cumulative, it is silent, and it is driven overwhelmingly by the top number. There is a case that shows up again and again in the clinical literature, and it looks almost exactly like this. Thomas is 66, retired school administrator from outside Columbus, walks 3 miles most mornings on a path near his neighborhood, takes lisinopril for blood pressure, has for 8 years, sees his doctor twice a year. His last reading at the office, 142/74. His doctor glances at it, notes that the diastolic is well within range, says it looks reasonable, refills the prescription, and moves on. But look at what that reading actually says. The top number, 142, is above the threshold where stroke risk climbs steeply. The bottom number, 74, is technically in the normal range, and the gap between them, 68, is well above the 60-point mark that research associates with significant arterial stiffness. Thomas's blood pressure was not fine. His arteries were stiff enough to widen the gap by nearly 70 points. That widening was not on the chart. It was not mentioned. The pulse pressure was never calculated, never discussed, and never tracked over time to see if it was getting worse. 12 months later, Thomas woke up one morning and could not find the word for coffee. He knew what it was. He could see the mug on the counter. He could smell it. He could not say the name. His wife asked if he was okay, and he nodded, but the word did not come back for almost a full minute. He told her he was just tired. She looked at him for a long time and said nothing. That was a transient ischemic attack, a warning stroke, the kind that leaves no visible damage on a scan, but tells you the next one might not be so brief. Thomas is a composite, drawn from patterns in the research literature, but his profile is one of the most common presentations in cardiovascular medicine. A person over 60 with a widening pulse pressure that is technically being managed because the bottom number looks fine and the top number is only a little elevated. He did everything right. He took his medication, he showed up for his appointments, he walked every morning, and none of it mattered, because nobody was tracking the number that actually predicted what happened next. The gap nobody watches. Let's clear up 3 things most people over 60 have been told, or assumed, that the research does not support. Myth: if your bottom number is normal, your blood pressure is fine. False. After age 60, a normal or even low diastolic number paired with a high systolic number is not reassurance. It is a marker of arterial stiffness. That combination is called isolated systolic hypertension. It is the most common form of high blood pressure in older adults, and ambulatory studies show it carries a stroke hazard equal to having both numbers elevated. Myth: your blood pressure reading at the doctor's office is the most accurate one. The opposite may be true. A meta-analysis of over 130,000 adults found that people with normal clinic readings but elevated home or nighttime readings, a condition called masked hypertension, had nearly double the risk of dying from cardiovascular causes. Between 11 and 14% of adults have this, and most do not know it. Your doctor's office reading may be the least informative number you have. Myth: if your blood pressure is controlled with medication, your stroke risk is handled. Not quite. Medication manages the number on the screen. It does not repair the damage already done to the artery walls, and it does not reverse the stiffness driving the top number higher. The SHEP trial showed that consistent control over 5 years reduced stroke by 36%, but that required years of sustained management. One controlled reading is not the finish line. It is the starting point. Here is what that means for you specifically. There are 5 signs that your top number may already be doing silent damage. Most of these get blamed on aging or stress. Most of them deserve a closer look. Stay for number 1. That single finding is the one most people over 60 have never been told, and it changes how you should think about every blood pressure check you have had in the last 5 years. Number 5. Your blood pressure readings swing more than 10 to 15 points from one check to the next, not just day to day, but visit to visit. 1 month it is 148 over 80. The next it is 132 over 76. The next it is 155 over 82. Most people treat that variation as normal noise, something about coffee, or rushing to the appointment, or which arm the cuff was on. It is not noise. A 2022 study in hypertension found that day-to-day systolic blood pressure variability was independently associated with white matter damage and cerebral artery dilation, even after accounting for average blood pressure levels. The swings themselves are doing damage. Each spike is a mechanical insult to vessels that can no longer flex, and most checkups measure blood pressure once, at one moment, on one day, and call it representative. Number 4. You have started forgetting names, not of strangers, but of familiar people who used to come instantly. A neighbor you have known for 12 years, a colleague from your last job, a character in a show you have been watching for 3 seasons. You know their face. You can describe them. The name is just not there when you reach for it. That pattern correlates strongly with white matter damage from sustained elevated pulse pressure. Small vessel disease in the brain does not announce itself with a dramatic event. It shows up as retrieval failures. The information is stored. The wiring that fetches it has been quietly degraded by years of pulsatile force against fragile vessels. Number 3. You notice you are slightly more winded on stairs than you were a year or 2 ago. Not dramatically. Just enough that you pause at the top landing for a breath you did not used to need. Chronically elevated systolic pressure forces the left ventricle to pump harder with every beat. Over years, the muscle wall thickens, a condition called left ventricular hypertrophy. The heart becomes stronger in the wrong way, bulkier, stiffer, less efficient at filling between beats. That subtle breathlessness is often the first external sign of a heart quietly overworked by stiff arteries. Number 2. Your ankles are slightly puffy by the end of the day. Not painful, not dramatic, but your socks leave deeper marks than they used to. Persistent systolic hypertension can impair the kidney's ability to manage fluid balance. The swelling is often dismissed as standing too long. But in the context of a high top number, it is a downstream signal that the kidneys are absorbing some of the same pulsatile damage that threatens the brain. And number 1, you get a dull headache in the morning that fades within an hour of getting up. Not a migraine, not a sinus headache, a vague pressure behind the forehead or the back of the skull that lifts as you move around and get your day started. That pattern is associated with nighttime blood pressure surges, your top number spiking while you sleep when nobody is measuring it, and your brain absorbing the impact for 6 or 7 hours straight. It is one of the earliest and most overlooked signs that systolic pressure is doing damage on a timeline your daytime readings never capture. Here is the number that puts all of this in perspective. In a study of nearly 27,000 men followed for over a decade, every 10-point increase in the top number raised stroke risk by 31%. Not 5%, not 10, 31. And stroke risk does not begin at 140/90, the traditional threshold most people think of as high blood pressure. It begins climbing from a systolic pressure of approximately 115, that is 25 points below the diagnostic line. By the time the top number reaches 130 to 139, stroke risk is already 79% higher than at normal levels. Most people over 60 leave their doctor's office thinking they are safe at 135. Nobody drew the line where the risk actually starts. How old are you right now? Write your age in the comments. Here is why it matters for this specific topic. The older you are past 50, the more your arteries have stiffened, and the more the top number has decoupled from the bottom number. If you are 55, this process is already underway. If you are 65, it has been running for over a decade. If you are 75, the top number is doing almost all the work, and the bottom number may be actively misrepresenting your risk. Your age is not just context here. It changes which of your two numbers you should be watching most carefully. Here is exactly what to do with everything you have just learned. This is the gap check protocol. 4 steps, no specialized equipment beyond what most of you already own. Step 1. Track your pulse pressure, not just your blood pressure. Every time you check your blood pressure at home, subtract the bottom from the top. Write both the reading and the gap in a notebook or your phone. Track the gap over weeks and months. A widening gap, even if the top number has not changed much, is a signal that arterial stiffness is progressing and is worth bringing to your doctor with the data to back it up. If you do not own a home blood pressure cuff, this is the single most useful health purchase you can make after 60. Arm cuffs, not wrist cuffs. Wrist devices are significantly less reliable in older adults because of changes in the radial artery. Step 2. Measure at the same times, twice a day, for 1 full week before your next appointment. Morning and evening. Sit quietly for 5 minutes first. Feet flat on the floor, arms supported at heart level. Same arm every time. This gives you what researchers call your ambulatory blood pressure pattern, and it catches what a single office reading cannot. Nighttime surges, morning spikes, and the visit-to-visit variability that is itself an independent risk factor. Print that week of numbers or write them on a card. Bring them to your next appointment. Ask your doctor to look at the pulse pressure trend, not just the individual readings. Step 3. Add isometric exercise, specifically wall sits, 3 to 4 times per week. A network meta-analysis of 270 randomized controlled trials found that isometric exercise training produced the biggest blood pressure reductions of any exercise type, approximately 8 points off the top number and 4 off the bottom. Larger than aerobic training, larger than resistance training, larger than combined programs. A wall sit is simple. Back flat against a wall. Slide down until your thighs are roughly parallel to the floor. Hold for as long as you can. Start with 20 to 30 seconds. Build toward 2 minutes over several weeks. 3 to 4 sets, 3 to 4 days a week. Consult your doctor before starting if you have a known heart condition, severely uncontrolled hypertension above 180 systolic, or joint problems that limit this position. Step 4. Adjust your sodium to potassium ratio. Reducing sodium intake by roughly 2 grams per day lowers the top number by 3 to 5 points and reduces stroke risk by approximately 20 to 25%. Increasing potassium to 3,500 to 4,700 milligrams per day is independently associated with a 24% lower stroke incidence. That does not mean buying potassium pills. It means eating more bananas, sweet potatoes, spinach, avocados, white beans and yogurt, and cutting back on processed food, canned soups, deli meats, and restaurant meals where the sodium hides. Discuss potassium supplementation with your doctor before adding it, especially if you take an ACE inhibitor, an ARB, or a potassium-sparing diuretic. Those medications change how your kidneys handle potassium. One supplement worth discussing with your doctor is magnesium, specifically magnesium glycinate or magnesium taurate, which are better absorbed and gentler on the stomach. Magnesium plays a role in arterial relaxation, and some research suggests supplementation may modestly improve arterial stiffness and blood pressure in older adults with suboptimal levels. The evidence is promising but not yet definitive. This is a conversation to have with your doctor, not an action to take on your own. Do not combine magnesium with certain antibiotics or bisphosphonates without checking for interactions. Now, remember the pulse pressure number you posted at the beginning of this video. Here is what I want you to do. Follow the gap check protocol for 14 days. Track your numbers morning and evening. Add the wall sits 3 to 4 times a week. Start shifting the sodium to potassium balance in your meals. Then recalculate your pulse pressure after 2 weeks and come back to this video. Write day 14 and your new gap in the comments. If your gap narrowed, reply to your original comment so we can all see it. Let's see what moves. 5 years from now, the people who understood this, who learned which number to actually watch, who started tracking the gap instead of just the reading, who brought a full week of home data to their doctor instead of relying on one measurement taken in a paper gown, those are the people who will still be here. Still sharp, still steady on their feet, still remembering every name at the table. Every blood pressure reading tells 2 stories. Most people spend their entire lives watching the wrong one. Every week, Inside Aging goes through the research that sits in medical journals, but never makes it into that 12-minute appointment. The findings that change how you understand what your body has been trying to tell you after 60. If you want that in your feed every week, subscribe now and tap the bell. Every video is built around what you actually need to know, and were never told. And if someone you love takes blood pressure medication, a spouse, a parent, a brother, a friend who always says the doctor says everything is fine, send them this video right now, not next week, now, because the number they have been watching may not be the one that matters most, and that is not the kind of thing you leave to chance.